Good morning. Today's session with Smartbox and Amanda Mason, we are going to look at Look Lab. And Amanda, if you have any handouts that you want to send me to get to them later, I will make sure that those get in there.
Perfect. Thank you. I'll send those over.
And I am going to stop sharing and give control over to Amanda.
Awesome. All right. Let's share here. Okay. So hopefully you guys can see my lovely slideshow now.
Man.
Perfect. Okay. So I am Amanda Mason. I'm an SLP and an ATP by licensure. I work now at this lovely company called Smartbox, and we make speech generating devices. We make hardware, we make software, and then we also make one of our own eye gaze cameras. Today, specifically, I'll be talking about Look Lab, as the screen indicates, which is one of our new eye gaze specific learning softwares that I'm really excited about. A little background on me. So I've done my time. I've worked in skilled nursing and some other areas like that, but my most prominent job, I guess, before this one was working with the ALS Association of Oregon and Southwest Washington as their assistive technology services coordinator for about 5 years before this position. So I love all things assistive technology. I love AAC. And so I was really excited for this job, this opportunity to kind of dig into this side of things a little bit and get to be part of development a little bit with some of my clinical knowledge and practice and things like that. Like Chandra said, please feel free to jump in with questions as I go along. Drop them in the chat box. I'll try to keep an eye on that, but also feel free to interrupt me if I miss one or something. This was a little bit of a last minute presentation, so please forgive any slight inaccuracies. I think it's all cleaned up, but just in case. So here's our presentation about Look Lab. Today I'll run through first. I'll make sure we're all on the same page about eye gaze, kind of a quick 101 of how it works, how the cameras work. I'll talk about our other eye gaze learning softwares. And then I'll do kind of a deeper dive into Look Lab itself. So the first thing that I think is important in a presentation like this is how we use our eyes, right? And it's kind of an obvious question, like, yeah, we look at things, but just thinking about this kind of helps center this eye gaze conversation and why software like Look Lab and some of the other ones we've come up with can be really important for people, because we don't use our eyes usually as computer pointers, or we don't usually dwell on items necessarily to make selections. We use them as receivers. We take in visual sensory information. We use them to navigate the world, like make sense of what's in front of us. All that kind of stuff is so important. And, of course, is second nature to most of us, to many of us, which is amazing. But it just, again, kind of really highlights how we don't use our eyes. So that's kind of more of what this slide is thinking about. We receive, process, store visual information. And it is, those of us who are lucky enough, it's relatively seamless for us, right? So eye gaze then, on the other side, is a direct selection access method. Generally in our world, you guys all probably are familiar, we use them combined with a computer of some sort, whether it's a full insurance funded speech generating device. You can add them to a lot of PC options, some tablets now too. There's all different kinds of options, but ultimately it's a direct selection method. You can access communication software with it. So use it to type out messages and speak, whether that's on a QWERTY keyboard or a symbol-based keyboard. You can also access a lot of your world around it with different accessible apps. So like our communication software with Smartbox is called Grid 3. You'll see a lot of similar ones with other companies, like Toby has Communicator, all those big ones where you can access things like your smart home functions, controlling your TV. If you have, smart curtains set up, it's amazing. All that kind of stuff you can use with them. So environmental control, accessible apps, YouTube, control music, all that good stuff can be accessed with eye gaze. And I like to make sure I also highlight how eye gaze itself works. So it's a camera. Actually, I'm going to skip to the next slide because this one's not that exciting. This one kind of starts to highlight it. We'll dive into this a little bit more later too. But here you can see just obviously a kind of silly cartoon of someone using an eye gaze device, but they've got their eye gaze computer tablet in front of them. It's facing them, not us. Along the bottom of it is the eye gaze camera. And in the eye gaze camera, there's infrared lights. And there's a bunch of different brands of eye gaze cameras out there. Which is great because there's a lot of different needs from different people for different eye reasons or lighting reasons or positioning reasons and things like that. But at their core, they all work relatively the same. The lights on the camera focus and find a specific point on the user's eye. For some cameras, that's the iris. For some, it's the pupil. For some, it's a glint on the eye. But they're finding a specific spot on the user's eyeball and reflecting off of that piece. So it's at the bottom of the computer. You can see that orange line kind of coming up from the bottom to the user's eye. The user can look at the screen and it triangulates then from what the camera itself is reading to where the user is looking to inform the computer what the user is looking at to make selections. Some of the barriers to eye gaze, because I feel like until you kind of dive in to eye gaze, it sounds like it should be easy. You look at something and select it, whether it's dwelling to select, you look at something for a certain amount of time and select it, or using a switch to select it, you look at something and press a switch to select it, or even blinking to select. There's a bunch of different options. It sounds like it should be relatively easy. But unfortunately, we have found that it's not always that easy. For some people it is, which is great. But for a lot of people, there are things like feelings of pressure and anxiety. I found this a lot in my work with the ALS Association. As we all probably know, ALS tends to hit an older population. And so sometimes I would go into homes where people weren't comfortable even using a cell phone, perhaps. And I try to meet people where they are and everything, but sometimes eye gaze is the choice where we kind of really want to start if possible. So I'm coming in and saying, okay, I know you're not comfortable with cell phones, but let's set up this giant computer in front of your face and you're going to use your eyes to control it. No big deal. But it is a big deal. So they feel really anxious about it. Maybe it's not super easy at first. So they get nervous. There's been studies showing that kind of pressure and anxiety from people can lead to device abandonment and kind of just lots of bad things where people end up not having access to a device because of that. Difficulty using eyes as pointers is our other bullet point here, and that's surprisingly hard too. Again, it's not how we normally use our eyeballs or our bodies or computers. So it's kind of this whole new way of using technology and ourselves, which is interesting. So there's
Amanda,
yeah.
I know that, and I didn't see it on your list, but
Oh yeah.
fatigue. Fatigue
Yes.
is such a huge thing, right?
Yep.
I went to
Absolutely.
ATIA last year and I tried every single one.
Mm.
Um, and they're all just a little bit different, but I noticed that while it was easy for me, right? I have great eye control.
Yep.
Um, it it was tiring
It's so
really
tiring.
quickly.
Yes. So
Yeah,
much more than you would think. I know. It's like you don't think of like your eyes get tired, but it's not something you think of as like oh like running, like okay, I have to build up my
right.
stamina for running, right? You don't think of that with eye gaze, but it's so true. That's one of the biggest things. There's kind of a good rule of thumb when someone's first starting eye gaze, like 10, maybe 20 minutes of practice at a time, and then give your eyes a true rest away from screens, all that stuff before
Yeah.
going back to practice again for that exact reason, because it takes time to build up that stamina for sure. I know I still get tired using it and I try to use it a lot just to kind of keep up, keep my skills sharp, people. Um, so, all these different barriers, there's a lot of amazing things that we as clinicians, caregivers, and everything can do to help alleviate barriers. This is a wonderful little tips and tricks sheet we have just to kind of highlight some of the things that we do, aside from softwares and things like that. So just thinking about, appropriate settings for eye gaze. This one's surprisingly huge. It's again one of those things that it sounds common sense, but it's so easy. Like I go to a lot of different settings in my job now, including like schools, which is amazing. We have these amazing teams, but it's so easy to have a team of, I don't know, even like 6 people. And then this kiddo is trying to learn eye gaze, and we're so excited and we're setting it up and like, okay, you're going to calibrate it and now go. And then we're all talking excitedly around them. And that's so distracting and can really kind of hurt their ability to concentrate and be successful with eye gaze. So it's a really important one to highlight. Choose an appropriate setting here. Positioning a client, of course, is key. Thinking about how that eye gaze camera works. Like I was saying, it's literally light reflecting off the user's eyeballs. So if the camera is way too low and someone's got heavier eyelids that maybe are looking, when they're looking down, cut off half of their pupil, and that's what the camera is trying to focus on, it's not going to be great accuracy for that user or anything like that. So positioning is really important. Thinking about head stability and positioning too is really important for someone who might have trouble holding their head up because of different neck or shoulder strength issues, core strength issues, making sure maybe they're leaned back and they have a nice, beautiful mount for their eye gaze device. So it's held in a position that's comfortable for them to work in and spend time in. Positioning the equipment that gets into that mounting piece, of course, too. There's a whole wonderful world of mounting that I know we have a lot of PTs on this call, so I'm guessing you guys are relatively familiar, but that's a really fun world that I learned a lot about the past many years and love. Thinking about different device settings. So thinking about if maybe someone has one eye that kind of tends to wander a little bit or gets a little more tired, you can set most eye gaze cameras to track just one eye or the other rather than both at the same time. That can be beneficial. And then starting simply. So just kind of not jumping in and being like, okay, here you go. Here's a page with 50 targets on it. You're set up and calibrated and away you go with eye gaze. So that can be really overwhelming for people of all ages at all points in their life. Okay. So that's some nice things that we as clinicians and caregivers and everything are doing. But what are we on the other side of things doing? I guess I get to include myself in both we's there. But now I'm also on the side of the speech generating device company, and we get to address what can we help do to alleviate some of those barriers. So to answer that, we started making years ago at this point this suite of eye gaze learning software. We started with Look to Learn, and I'll dive into these a little bit more in a minute. So we Look to Learn, oh gosh, I want to say like 10 or 15 years ago now. I probably should have looked up that exact number, but a while ago. We've added scenes and sounds. We've got a Look to Read software, and then our newest program, Look Lab, all with the idea of helping people really kind of master this access method in a really kind of specific way and helpful way, hopefully. Okay, so to make sure, oops, let me move this little guy from my notes. Yeah, I think this is probably just a little thing to show you guys how eye gaze can look from the other end. Let me jump up to this one. So jumping into Look to Learn. So one of the softwares that we created, there's about 40 specially created motivating and fun activities to get started with eye tracking technology. So every activity has been developed in consultation with teachers and therapists to improve access and choice-making skills for people learning eye gaze. I'm guessing a lot of you have maybe seen this out in the field. It tends to be pretty popular. It's available on many different eye gaze devices. So it's compatible with Tobii devices and PRC devices and things. But there's options like sensory activities, exploring activities. So low pressure, just kind of looking around the screen and starting to learn that cause and effect, looking at something with your eyes, make something happen on the screen. And then, turning into more targeted activities that help us improve accuracy of eye tracking, making choices, and controlling eye gaze. Look to Read is then a more literacy-based program. So we of course all have could talk a lot about AAC users and their literacy. And so this was an idea to help help kind of foster that skill for people. So there's 16 different animated stories in here. Per some of the research that we looked into and found, the animations aren't tied to aren't on the same page as the words, which apparently is very important in literacy. I'm still honestly learning a lot about this world, and it's been fascinating to me. So the words are on one page, and they'll highlight and they'll go through, and you'll kind of read along with the story, and then you'll get the animation after that. So it can be a really fun, it's kind of like a storybook. There's different stages of progression, and it focuses on pulling out letter sounds, high frequency words. There's different communication grids built into it for each story. So you can also start to build in the communication along with the literacy piece and talking about what you're reading and all that kind of stuff too. It's really suitable for any AAC learner, wherever they are in their journey. And it can start as, with someone who's just starting to learn that cause and effect of eye gaze learning, if they want to work on both eye gaze and literacy at the same time, which is great. We always want to double up on skills in this world, at least when possible. And then we added on scenes and sounds as well. Scenes and sounds it kind of is another step towards the low pressure side of things, from look to learn. So it's got more low pressure activities that don't have scores, they don't have anything you have to beat or meet or anything, just kind of enjoying that low pressure activity where you can practice with your eye gaze without feeling that pressure or anxiety of anything, and they can be fun. So you've got, like, you can see the little like DJ frog guy in the middle, that's really fun. There's some scenes where if you look at the window, the monster opens the curtains, all that kind of stuff in here. So then we finally get to Look Lab. So all of those have been around for a few years. Look Lab we just introduced, I think about 6 months ago now. And the whole idea behind it was we've got these great softwares, but they do tend to be pretty like kid friendly, although we like them to be available to AAC users at any point. There's a lot of, fun animations and things like that, but I don't always want to put that in front of one of my adult users. And so we really wanted to create something that was for maybe a more mature, perhaps literate user. They don't have to be literate to use it, but just maybe that more mature age. So it starts to kind of focus in also on really specific eye gaze skills. So where Look Lab where Look to Learn and Look to Read kind of have their goals, and you can focus on skills in certain activities. Look Lab really has specific, like, okay, I'm trying to learn to drive my wheelchair with my eye gaze device. How can I practice that without driving my really heavy wheelchair around and smashing into walls a little bit in my house? Like, what kind of skills can I work on here? So it starts to address some of those things. You can also use it, just as a note, it's mainly meant for eye gaze, but it also is compatible with any USB access options, so like head pointers or things like that, which is another thing I worked a lot with at the ALS Association. That's really nice. And again, it can be used kind of for anyone. You can start really early with cause and effect, building cause and effect skills, to someone looking to really improve their precision for something like computer control or driving their wheelchair or all those different kinds of things. So let's take a little peek. So this is the home screen of Look Lab. I am going to try to do a live demo, but I had a little thing with my cords this morning, and I'm not sure we'll get into it, but that's okay because there's also a free trial online, so I can give you guys all free access to it. But this is the home screen of Look Lab, and you can kind of start to see the 5 main categories we pulled out, and then we've got our favorites categories where you can heart something and have it be quickly accessible. So we've got fun activities that are relaxing, easy to learn games, kind of an easy way to just jump in and get started. There's a challenge category, so more complex and strategic games that involve time-dependent reactions often, which can be really important for someone, who maybe is even doing like computer control or trying to do work with their eye gaze device, or again, driving their wheelchair or something like that. We've got a puzzle category, so activities with a problem-solving element to them. A creative category where we've got a couple of different things focused on music or art, things like that. And then honestly, my personal favorite is the mindfulness category. And not that I'm that big of a mindfulness person in life, but for myself, but they're really simple cause and effect activities. And this is exactly what I was craving when I was working again at the ALS Association, just thinking of some of those folks who weren't as comfortable with technology, putting them in front of a screen where, oh, they can just feed some koi fish in a pond and watch them swim around a little bit, or like move some bubbles around, and there's nothing to do, like nothing you have to do. There's no time limit. It's just kind of nice and relaxing. There's calming music, and there's some great options in there to check out. Um, these are the fun category games. So you can see we've got things like a paddle pop, circle tennis. The hoops one tends to be the most popular. You've got a basketball hoop and you're trying to catch basketballs. There's bombs that come up that you have to avoid then. So it gives you some really nice like kind of strategic thinking too a little bit. It also is important to note that this is the same order they're lined up in the software, and it's a good order to start in. So Stargaze is the easiest of the fun activities, and then Pocket Ball gets down to the most challenging down at the bottom there. These are some of the puzzle activities. So they've got more of a problem solving element. There's, again, different levels of challenge here. It's not just for advanced users. There's, match and smash is pretty straightforward. Memory match can be, 4 squares or more. It could kind of get a little harder as you go, but there are some more challenging ones too, like the mouse maze at the bottom. Simon Says can be fun. It gets really fast. It's just the Simon Says game we all probably remember from our childhood. And then these are some of the challenge activities. They get, again, a little more complex, a little more strategic. They have time-dependent reactions. You can see the pipe dodge is, I don't think I'm technically supposed to say it, but it's got an Angry Birds kind of vibe to it, where you're flying through. This one's great, for some of those wheelchair driving, sustained attention folks who need to work on that. Crawly Cruncher is important for transferable skills such as like drive-by-eye, attention to task, sustained visual attention. There's a constant change of direction with him. He's a little worm that goes around. He's trying to eat all the stars, but you don't want to eat your own self. And then there's things like Hedge Hopper too. There's the zombie splash at the bottom. That's one of my favorite. You get to you're shooting zombies, but just with water guns, so it's not too violent. It's just fun. And then finally here are the mindfulness activities. So we've got that fish pond one I was talking about. And fireworks, you can just look around at the screen with the popcorn on it, and it just kind of moves the popcorn around gently and everything. There's a pattern pop one. It's a really nice section that I think sometimes gets overlooked, but I think it's really important for a lot of people. So, to that not. Sorry. There we go. Okay. Another nice thing about Look Lab that we made sure we wanted to add in was being able to track your progress. We get asked this all the time with our communication software, and then with some of the other softwares that we have, like Look to Learn and things, is, how can we tell if we're improving? We did end up creating a workbook for Look to Learn and Look to Read, so you can kind of start to get some of that quantitative data for people. But we were able to build it into Look Lab. So we've got these heat map options you can turn on. You can save these and kind of record people's progress as they go. But it'll show what parts of the screens have been accessed. So you can start to see if certain corners of the screens or quadrants of the screens are difficult for someone to access perhaps, or maybe they need to practice because the right side can be they might have a little bit of right side neglect or something for themselves, all that different kind of stuff. So they can be really handy. We also have, you can kind of sort the games rather than, those creative, fun, mindfulness categories. You can also sort them through the eye gaze skills that they're working on. So if you have specific goals someone's working towards, you can start to pull out which games or activities might be beneficial to them there. It's really handy. Each game will also have a little blurb before it that shows you which skills it's targeting within and how they might be transferable for the user, which is nice. And then this is the workbook that we made to go with Look Lab. It's available on our hub. So when you get the software, you can go and you can download it. You can use it online, whichever is easiest for you. But again, it's a really nice way to get some of that quantitative data as well if you need for someone who, you're like, how do I justify them just playing games in my therapy session with me or something as they're practicing eye gaze? And maybe we know why, of course, but we have to prove it to mom or IAP goals or whatever we're doing. There's a couple different pieces of it. It's got a skills checklist, so you can come and talk about what you've been working on, how they're doing, if they've hit those skills, if they're, nailing it, if we need to keep working on it. And then there's also this piece which gives us a couple different options. So we can talk about if we're working on a specific skill in a specific game, but then there's the part at the bottom where it talks about engagement, independence, success. So you can still put some of those qualitative comments in a way that can make it easier to write into reports, to justify your use of this software for people as they're learning.
Amanda, we
Yeah.
have a question.
Mhm.
Is there a progression with eye gaze skills? Wendy's
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Great question. Yes. And so, of course, it always depends where people are starting, right? But yeah, in general, a lot of people kind of need to jump in with that cause and effect starting point. So I look at something happens, like with any other access method that I'm sure you guys are, familiar with. Jump in there and then often work to, okay, now I see that my eyes are making something happen on the screen, in the real world, whatever it is. Now let's make it more purposeful. So now let's target it. So now I'm moving into my challenges portion or something like that, perhaps, where I can start to work on a certain skill of like, I need to hit the target in the specific area. And then it kind of moves into a more independent use of like, okay, what do I want to do with my eyes? I want to type a message. As an SLP, I'm always, thinking about communication. So I'm like, okay, how can I get someone now to make choices to tell me what they want or tell me what they need, or, type a message to their friend, an email or something like that. So yes, there's definitely a progression. And it's kind of historically been a little hard, I think, for at least on our end of things, SLP end of things, to be able to show and talk about that progression, because we don't have a ton of tools yet. There's more and more all the time, which is amazing because we all, I think, see the need in the industry and around. But there just haven't been a ton of ways to talk about it. So we're like, okay, like they're doing good. They spelled out hello, or they chose the symbol for hello, my name is whatever. And that's kind of been a lot of it so far until the past few years, when there's been this awesome explosion of amazing softwares to help people learn, and then these tools that go alongside, to help pull out some of those like skills and be able to quantify them a bit more for people, or at least show a progression of them.
And then this workbook, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly, is available as a free download on your website, right?
Yep.
Anyone can go in there and download it.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on our hub website, which I think I have a QR code at the end that'll take us to this, but I'll make sure it's in the handouts if not. And yeah, we've got a couple different websites, so just so you know, I'll make sure that they're pulled apart a bit for us. There's a couple different settings that are worth knowing about in Look Lab as well. And if you're familiar with any of the other softwares that we have, these have been kind of started to be built in. Some of them, it hasn't been able to be built into all of them just because of age and how they are. So when we were building Look Lab, we wanted to make a real point to make these settings available. So things like the accessibility pieces. So of course it's compatible with many different eye gaze cameras and softwares. And then you can change a lot of the user interface settings as well that I'll run through on here, and then hopefully be able to show you in a demo as well in a minute. But you can choose your access options. So in Look to Learn, it's a facilitated activity throughout until you get into the actual activity, and then the eye gaze user takes over. So that means that the user always has to have, a caregiver, a clinician, or someone getting them into each activity. With Look Lab, you can choose, as you can see, between independent, choice making, or guided access. So you can have someone completely independently using Look Lab, which is really nice. They don't have to be dependent on someone to get them in and out of activities. You also can change the appearance on all of the games. So if we've got someone who's got different visual needs or impairments, or just the games are kind of a lot because we tried to make them fun, but maybe that's too much for someone. We want a more minimal experience. You can see you've got minimal and detailed experience, detailed options for each game. This also can make things higher contrast too. So I know like I've set a couple kiddos with CVI up with the minimal minimal appearance game options, and that's been really beneficial to them in their eye gaze learning. And you also, of course, compare it with the communication grids. So there are some communication grids built in to Look Lab, but you can seamlessly, there's a button within Grid that you can jump into Look Lab, and then from Look Lab back into Grid, which is our communication software. This picture shows a symbol-based communication grid, a pretty basic one, which is a great place to start for some people, but it also can be built into our, some of our more QWERTY keyboard-based communication systems. Wherever someone is, Look Lab can be easily accessible to them if we want it to be. And then there's also easy mode and standard mode. So for each game you can choose, like the Crawly Cruncher one, instead of building up points and you die once you eat your own body by accident or something, you can set it on easy mode where you can just keep going forever and build a huge worm that can just cross over itself and go around forever and ever, which can be fun and super motivating for some people. So you can kind of help people moderate what works for them, what they enjoy, and that kind of thing. This was really exciting. So I think I kind of mentioned in the beginning, it was really fun. I was able to be part of the clinical team for developing Look Lab a bit, but we also really focus on the user experiences for it. So this is one of our users we used for development. His name is Tolu, and we worked with him and then this other woman, Donna, his caregiver and ATP specialist. I'll show you the next page. And we refined a lot of the activities with their help. So even though it's a pretty new product to us, like he's been using it for a long time, so he's been able to kind of really see the longer term benefits of it, focusing, and he says my looking has improved and he feels quicker with eye gaze than before, which is awesome. He's really awesome.
Thank you for joining us for this abbreviated session of Echo Voices. Unfortunately, the internet did go out at this point. This was originally recorded during our big ice storm here in Oregon, but we appreciate your joining us anyways. And as always, thank you so much for everything that you do.